Thank you very much.
Photography is basically communication. It's visual communication between two people or between one person and the audience that that person wishes to show their work to. There are many, many good images out there, but it's an image that actually makes the viewer stop and look and causes a reaction to that image in front of them that makes a good photograph. I am a fourth generation portrait photographer. The business was founded by my great-grandfather back in 1864 in Edinburgh. What I love about photographing people is where you actually get to be part of their lives for that brief moment of time. By finding out about them, it helps to bring them out, and that then comes out in the finished portrait. As a photographer, you do have to be romantic. You do have to have that soft edge to your core. You do have to be able to melt into what you're trying to create so that you just become that visual observer of the moment. All I ever wanted to do was be a photographer. And every day I wake up with a passion for this business. The creative process is such an awe-inspiring process, and to be very much part of that gives me goosebumps. My name is Trevor Yerbury, and I am a professional photographer.
And here he is, the man in black himself, Trevor Yerbury. Good evening, Trevor.
Good evening, Mr. Hayes. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
Now, as you said in the film, you're a fourth generation photographer, so it really does appear to be in your genes.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I went to boarding school in England. I left in 1968 with no qualifications whatsoever because photography was all I ever wanted to do. And so, yes, that's how I live.
But can you explain the attraction of photography for you?
I think it's the diversity. I think the ability to dip in and out of various genres in photography, be it street, be it portraiture, be it landscape. We, Faye and I have tried all of those. I think there's always something to do. There's always an avenue to go down if you haven't tried it before. So to me, that's the attraction of photography, whatever genre it happens to be.
Well, you mentioned your great-grandfather. Let's have a look at your family tree then now, because as you say, fourth generation. So who have we got here then?
Well, top left is great-grandfather who founded the business. He came up from London. He graduated from the London School of Photography in 1863 and then appeared in Edinburgh in 1864. He started the business. Beneath is my grandfather, who unfortunately I never got to meet. He died about 8 months after I was born, but he was that unique combination of being a brilliant businessman and a superb photographer. And then, of course, my father, and then, of course, Faye's portrait of myself when I had hair and dark hair.
So you've always had a ponytail and a black hat then?
Always.
Now, your grandfather photographed many famous people, didn't he, including the King?
He did, and in point of fact, we still have, underneath a spare bed somewhere, the glass plate negative of this image, with a hand-painted background, which was painted on by one of the retouchers.
Why was he chosen to do this?
I have no idea, Peter. I wish I knew. Grandfather photographed a lot of royalty and politicians. He did people like J.M. Barrie. We've got a platinum palladium print of J.M. Barrie by grandfather. We've got people like Peter Ustinov when he was rector of University. So who knows? It's just a nice portrait.
And you showed me one cutting in which he was described as one of the foremost photographers in Europe, which presumably was why he was chosen to photograph de Gaulle.
Yes, well, he had a great friend in Edinburgh called Baron Marchand, who was the French Consul General for Scotland. And when de Gaulle came across to Scotland, well, to Edinburgh in 1942, where the Free French troops were training, Marchand persuaded de Gaulle to have his portrait taken by grandfather, and this is one of them. This is signed by de Gaulle and by grandfather.
And then at the end of the second, well, actually, no, not at the end, when Paris had been liberated, so the 27th of March, 1945, at the invitation of the French government, grandfather was flown to Paris, put up in, well, had a suite. He was given a suite in the Ritz, although he did mention there was no coal, so it was very cold. He got a chauffeur-driven car, and he did another portrait of de Gaulle, which now hangs at in the museum in Paris.
Incredible. I'll make a note then to Mike Taylor, the RPS boss. Next time you come down to Bristol, we'll book you a suite at the Arnos Manor Hotel.
I
Not
think,
quite the Paris Ritz, but
not quite, yeah, I mean, the Arnos is, I have fond recollections of the Arnos. But we've got the newspaper clippings from the press coverage of his trip to Paris, and I think the only thing grandfather objected to, apart from the coffee made out of acorns, was the fact he could not get his porridge, which upset him greatly.
right, let's move on to the next image, which is rather extraordinary. What's going on here?
Well, this is a group of Edinburgh photographers taken, we think, at the Blackford Hill. The white dot you can see, Peter, centre right slightly, is my great-grandfather with the beard underneath. But these are just, Edinburgh was a hotbed of professional photography. There were many, many studios in Edinburgh at that time.
And your grandfather really was your inspiration, wasn't he?
Grandfather, yeah, oh, absolutely. I would have loved dearly to have met him. He wrote me a very nice note from his hospital bed, which I still keep. But no, I would love to have met him. I think he influenced me a lot.
Now, your family was originally from London and Wiltshire, so how come you've all ended up in Edinburgh?
Well, we used to think, Peter, that with great-grandfather, we always had this romantic fantasy. It was the love of a woman, and he'd met somebody and she dragged him all the way up across the border to the Highlands of Scotland, or at least to Edinburgh. And we thought that for many years, until we were having dinner about 5 years ago, Faye and I, with a professor of photography, and I was recounting the same story to him. And he said, no, you have it all wrong. And I said, why? He said, well, when Fox Talbot patented the daguerreotype, he only patented it in England. So Scotland, Wales, Ireland, anybody could use the technique there and sell without having to pay the royalty. So hence, a lot of photographers came up to Scotland and obviously to other places in the UK where they didn't have to pay the patent fee.
Ah, great story. I'll tell you what, why don't we have a look at some of your grandfather's portraits now? To the 20s and the 30s. Absolutely fabulous, aren't they?
They're beautiful. They're very soft and gentle. And in fact, it was, I think it was a panel of classic figure studies, they were called, that got grandfather his fellowship with the Royal as well.
So what did you learn from your grandfather in terms of style and technique?
Gentleness, classical, stylish, non-offensive to anybody. Just, yes, I just loved his, the emotional qualities of his images. And we still have those 5 images, or 6 images. They were printed on a paper called Gevelux, Alpha Gevelux, and they hang in our bedroom.
Incredible. But how does your approach differ then to your grandfather's?
Well, obviously we've moved on. You can't sort of copy what's been done already, but although we do studio portrait, we do nudes in the studio occasionally, we much prefer to work outside on location within an environment. I think placing a nude within an environment actually lends the environment to the nude and the nude to the environment. And so the textural qualities of whatever you happen to place, stone, trees, against flesh, is the route we prefer to go down if we can.
Well, we can see that now. Let's have a look at 1 or 2 of your own images. You mentioned trees. Well, here's one very incredible tree, and the nude obviously is very, very small in the frame. What were you trying to achieve with this image?
I think the simplistic answer to this one, I mean, everybody, as you know, Peter, everybody will read something different into an image, everybody. And no matter what I say, somebody else will say something else about it and they see something differently. To me, it was primarily about the texture of young skin against an old gnarled tree. And you can probably see the face in the tree left-hand side, a third of the way up. And it was more about nature, fragility. You know, the tree's been there for hundreds of years, and the form of the human form just sitting underneath it plays emphasis on the form of both the tree and of the figure.
I posted this on the landscape group of the Royal Photographic Society on Facebook, and someone said, what a pity about the nude. Would have been a brilliant landscape on its own.
Well, I mean, yeah, you can't please everybody, Peter, I'm afraid, yeah.
Now, the next one, I believe, was in Venice, wasn't it? To Mark Square.
This was in Mark Square. And we go there every year. We have done for the past 5-6 years. Faye and I go at least once, if not twice a year. And this was really, we wanted to use this particular location for several years, but we never quite got round to finding the right model to use in it, or the right subject. And it was just the context between the 2 semi-nude sculptures and the naked body at the doorway. Contrast between the stone and the flesh was really what we were after, and that beautiful back. I mean, bear in mind, when we shoot these images, I mean, this was done probably 6:30 in the morning in St. Mark's Square. I show the subject what to do, or Faye will show them what to do. We will rehearse it draped, and then when we're ready to shoot, 6 frames at the very most, and that's it done.
So you have to go very early in the morning, and presumably you don't need to ask permission, you just turn up.
No, I mean, if you were to look at this image in the full, or if you drew back, you would see Faye to the left-hand side with a house coat, but there is never anybody around at St. Mark's Square that time of the morning, so we're pretty safe.
Well, if you look at the next slide, do you try out various poses and then choose the one that seems right? Or do you have a storyboard and everything arranged before you even arrive at the venue?
No, we certainly don't do storyboarding. That's far too clever for me. I couldn't even get involved in that. But here, what we're trying to do, I mean, this bench is in the grounds of a French castle. And it was the curves of the arms of the bench echoing the curves of the shape of the figure that first attracted me to having Laura lying out in that kind of repose, sort of almost depressed fashion. The circle behind her reflects the circle of her hair, the bob that Faye cut into it. So it was very much about contrasting the form of the bench with the form of the figure.
I've seen an awful lot of images preparing for this talk, and I've realized how easy it is to get it wrong. Just one slight thing, not quite right, spoils the entire image.
Well, we're very keen. I keep saying this when we're doing a talk or a seminar. We're very keen on the minutiae of the image, which is we always, either Faye or I, will show the pose to the subject beforehand. So we will put ourselves in the pose that we perceive to be the right one for the location. But then we will look at hands, how the hands are placed, are the fingers in the right position, are the feet, the toes, all the small parts, rather than just shooting off, you know, lots of frames of film. And we look at the smallest details before we take the photograph.
So everything's got to be right
Absolutely
to
right.
achieve an elegant pose,
Yes.
a classical pose. Well, including, I think you're recreating something from the past here. If you look at the next one, where on earth did you get the bow and arrow for a start?
Well, this is actually the same. This is a castle that belongs to a friend of ours, a private castle over in the west, on the east coast. And it belonged to them. I mean, I just happened to mention to Charlotte, do you happen to have a bow and arrow? And she just rummaged away in this wonderfully derelict room and appeared with this. And it just echoes. I think Faye and I are great lovers of Art Deco, Peter. I mean, a lot of our house is dedicated to Art Deco, and we bought a lot of auctions. And I remember years ago in Edinburgh, we missed out on buying a sculpture of a very similar pose. And I've always wanted to recreate this. And lo and behold, we managed to achieve it. It's just purely dedicated to the Art Deco era.
A little bit different, of course, this image, because the model is straining a little with the bow and arrow. So you can see the outline of her body and the muscles in a more defined way than usual.
We actually used 3 models over the course of 2 years with different bow and arrow and 3 different models to try and get the right person with the right angle in the body that looked in the right, that had the right hair, and this was the one that won.
No, it does look superb. Now, the next one looks incredibly uncomfortable. Did this model have a blanket between herself and the tree?
No, she didn't.
You swine. Must have been very uncomfortable.
It was particularly uncomfortable. The one thing we've always, and I've always worked with, is we will only work with models or whoever that we have a good relationship with, that become friends, rather than just, you know, you're here, let's get on with it. So they have to be empathetic to what we want to do. There has to be a synergy between us. And when they get involved in doing a shoot, they are more than happy to go that extra mile to get the image, even if it does cause a little bit of pain.
Now, speaking of trees, someone else who influenced your approach to photography was Anne Brigman, who operated again in the 1920s, and you clearly admired her a great deal.
Oh, love her work, absolutely adore her work. We have a huge book from the exhibition that was held over in the States of Anne's work. And I just
say that again?
We have a large book of the exhibition that was held over in America. And I just love, the fact that she's the subject in many of them. There's self-portraits. But again, it's looking at grandfather's work and looking at Anne's work. It's the softness, it's the gentleness, it's just the synergy with the landscape and the figure, the human figure.
Now, you mentioned Faye a few times, your wife, of course, yes. And she is always with you. But when you go to an outside location and you ask a model to go into a wood and get naked and go up a tree, there has to be a lot of trust between you.
Absolute trust. That's why we only work with a very, very small handful of models. I mean, back in the 80s, there were no such thing as models that you could book. So the 80s images are all just friends and friends of friends who came along and they just did it for the love of doing it. Now, of course, but we only work. There's a set of criteria that we work to. One is the model must be under 5'5" if at all possible, because taller models cannot get into the kind of positions that the limbs are in synergy with the body. They have to be preferably light hair rather than black, so we go for that. No tattoos, or at least a small tattoo that can be removed, and no piercings, and they have to have, we would call it alabaster skin tone. Pale skin, because we like both of us like to set our images against fairly dark backgrounds, so the pale alabaster skin will then pop.
And of course, Faye does the hair, the makeup, and all that sort of thing as well, isn't she?
Peter, to be honest, without Faye's input with hair and makeup, and as well as being a talented photographer in her own right, without the hair and makeup she does, particularly the hair, the images would be nowhere near as good as they are.
Well, let's have a look at another image now, because what I'd like to ask you is, with an image like this, with the nude so small in the frame, what are you seeking to achieve? You know, what is your intent with an image like this?
Well, this image was actually done in the top floor of the Richard de Marco Gallery in Edinburgh, probably about 85, 86. And it was shot in a 10:8 Vista. And it was just the window to the world. You know, I just love that decaying. This is where we're all going. You know, our skin is going to end up like the plaster work on the wall. It's going to decay, crumble, disappear. But outside that window, there is something to look forward to. Now, just going off slightly at a tangent, there's a story to say that this image was in an exhibition in Edinburgh back in probably 87. They were all printed on Exeter paper to 2024. And the gallery that hosted the exhibition, one of the directors phoned me up about a month later and said, we have somebody who's seen this image and they wondered whether you would recreate it for her. And we thought, well, we don't really do that kind of thing, but let's meet and have a chat and see. So we set up a meeting, and Faye and I went along, sat down, had a coffee. We met this young lady who was probably mid-20s, mid to late 20s. And she said she'd love to do the same pose, the same position in the same room. And we said, well, why? Because what we don't want is you kind of using this for saying, you know, this was done by somebody else. And it turned out that she was HIV positive and she only had some months to live. And she had a young daughter, and she fell in love with this image so much that she wanted to recreate the image and leave it for her daughter to remember her by, which was a great proof of how important photography can be to some individuals when they see an image that just sinks into them and just becomes what they want to be.
What a story. And you did that, did you?
Oh, we did it. Yeah, we did it. We gave it to her. We framed it up for her. And we gifted it to her. There was nothing. And we heard, I think, about 9 months later, she'd passed away. But we now know that her daughter at least has a memory of her mother.
Fabulous. Now, you say you're still passionate, even after all these years.
Yeah.
So what advice have you got for photographers who say they've lost their mojo?
I can say a lot. I think one thing we do, Peter, is we're great readers of photography books. We look and read about and listen to and watch anything about any genre of photography, be it whatever. And we get inspired by things, you see things. I can never understand why anybody, in fact, Faye and I were just talking today about doing another project that's totally unrelated to anything. And we thought, yeah, that sounds a good crack. Let's have a shot. Now, sometimes projects work, sometimes they don't work, but there is no excuse not to be inspired by all aspects of photography. I mean, I would love to do street photography. Faye's brilliant at it because at 5 foot and half an inch or 1.5 inches, she can do it brilliantly because nobody looks at her. I go along 6'5" with a ponytail and a camera and people see me immediately, so I'm ruined.
Right, let's move on now. The next image features a ballerina.
Yes.
So what's the feeling about this one then?
Well, this was shot for a documentary that was being made about her work, and Miriam's a member of the, well, she was with London School of Ballet, and we brought her up, and this is shot with the Hasselblad on film, and it was to show just movement of the skirt, so it was just trying slow exposures, quarter of a second, half a second, and to get her to stop at the right place at the right time with the head in the right position. Of course, Faye's beautiful Art Deco hairstyle does lend to it, but I just love that softness of the skirt flowing away from her, which again, Faye made. So, you know, the whole thing is a collaborative effort.
So what equipment do you mostly use?
Well, we use the wee Fujis. We both have the little Fujis. We still use the Hasselblad. I still use 10x8 occasionally. The equipment doesn't really matter. It's, I mean, I'm sitting down here somewhere with one of those little lomography cameras, which I've been using frequently. So yeah, it's just to create something new. In fact, I was speaking to Paul about pinhole cameras recently.
Oh, Paul Mitchell.
Yeah, because I thought, hey, pinhole, that'd be good fun to play with. So yeah, there's just so much to do, Peter, and so little time to have it all, to achieve it all in. There's so many things you can do.
In fact, we had a question just come in now. What camera do you use the most? What is your favourite camera?
What camera do we use the most? In truth, probably the X Pro 2, the Fuji X Pro 2, the most.
And of course, being a Scot, you make some of your equipment last a very long time, don't you?
Well, there's no point in paying out money if you don't have to, Peter.
How old is that reflector?
Probably about 30 years.
Now, you spoke in the opening film about needing a soft edge, about melting in to whatever you're trying to create. So what do you think of photographers like Helmut Newton, who is most definitely hard-edged, completely different approach to nude portraiture?
I love his work. I admire his work greatly. I think he's one of the 20th century's greatest photographers. His work is stunning. We were fortunate enough 2-3 years ago, we go to Photo Paris every year, and through a mutual friend of ours, Kitty, in Paris, we were fortunate enough to have lunch with Sylvia Goebel, who was one of the 4 models in this image, in the 4 nudes. And she regaled us for 2 or 3 hours with stories about Helmut, and she had nothing but good things to say about him.
That's really interesting, because you hear a lot of bad stuff about Helmut Newton, but never from the models. It's always other people. Yeah,
I think it's either jealousy or rumor mongering, but no, Sylvia was just wonderful, beautiful woman, and she just loved Helmut to bits.
And now, yes, another approach to making nude images from the incomparable Albert Watson.
Yes.
And he said, these next 2 images of Kate Moss were 2 of the best he'd ever taken. And she thought they were the best 2 ever taken of her, which is something, because she had so many taken. And they're deliberately trying to tell us something about the subject, a bit of a narrative, if you like. And in this first one, the backbone plays a vital part. She's facing away from the camera, of course. So what do you think of Watson's style?
Again, I love Albert's work. I mean, he's a stunningly talented photographer and a fellow Scot. I love this image. I love that spinal line going down her back. It's just beautiful. And the tonal range in that print is gorgeous.
And the next one is an extremely well-known image and reveals a lot about the subject's personality.
Yes.
So what I'm getting at is, your style is so classical. Do you ever use this sort of less formal approach to photography, the nude portraiture?
Occasionally in the studio we would, yes. I mean, obviously we don't always do the same thing. We do go off at tangents, we do try things out, and if they work, they work, and if they don't, they don't. We have done, this shows a great deal of fragility and defensiveness and softness and gentleness, I think. Whereas with our work, we prefer the nude to be within a landscape, within a broader landscape, rather than having it sort of close up.
One thing we haven't mentioned is your printing technique, and we have an image of your darkroom, which is remarkably tidy, I have to say. But let's have a clip now from another film made about you and Faye, which explains the process you use.
Thank you.
Once the image has been selected, we then go to the next stage of the process, which is to produce a digital negative. Here we will be using the platinum palladium process, patented in 1873, and also the same process that my great-grandfather would have been using in his day.
With digital, the finished effect that we are looking for is as though we have shot it on film.
I think if you have never seen or felt the magic of an image appearing in a tray filled with chemistry, you have never really appreciated what real photography is about. A platinum palladium print and the paper that it is printed onto will last for quite literally thousands of years.
And And here is that image in all its glory. Do you still get pride when you produce an image like this?
Oh God, yes, absolutely. When I said earlier in that other video, you get goosebumps. You know, when you produce an image which you're proud, and you know, we are very, no, not very, we are highly critical of our work, Peter. I mean, we delete more stuff, we destroy more negatives than we keep. We only will do one print from any session. So when you get an image that works on all levels, where everything is right, I mean, it took Miriam probably 10, 15, 20 attempts to get this exact pose.
Do you and Faye argue about which is the best image?
Yes, frequently.
Who wins? Who wins?
We don't have winners, but we have kind of a mutual understanding of what we both like. And you know, I will walk past Faye's computer screen and say, no, I don't like that one, and then she'll retort by saying, well, I don't like your one either. So there we go. But no, we tend to, whatever we choose finally, as in when we choose images for the books, we have to choose images that we're both happy with.
Because you do make fantastic books, I have to say. Now, when we promoted this talk on social media, someone said there should be a discussion about photographers who specialize in the naked female form. I'll quote this woman. She said, "The male gaze approach surely needs a reset button." What's your response to that sort of comment?
Well, I don't want to be taken off air, Peter, so I will be diplomatic. I think, you know, nude, art nude, whatever you want to call it, fine art photography, has been around since the inception of photography. It's been part of the building process of photography. The human form is, why are people frightened of the human form? The understanding I have, Peter, is that comments like that, you will never, ever, ever persuade anybody otherwise. There's a fixed mindset. We have open minds. We will look at any type of photography. When you get that kind of attitude, I would akin it to you, Peter, trying to persuade a die-in-the-wool Trump supporter to go vote for the Democratic Party coming November. You won't change their minds. So,
impossible. And of course, you do photograph the male form as well, don't you?
yes.
Occasionally. Is it more difficult? I mean, we're talking about different muscles, different shape, you know, different definition, really.
Yes, I mean, we have done, in fact, to be honest, Faye's done more nude males than I have. I think our problem is that if we lived in Los Angeles, then we would have a surplus. But we live in Edinburgh, in Scotland. Trying to find a male nude figure that is not over-muscled, over-ripped, just doesn't happen. Rodney was actually a dancer from New York who was across back in the late 80s, early 90s. He was doing pantomime. We got to meet him because we used to do the fashion spreads for the Scotland on Sunday magazine, and he was chosen to be a model. And he came to us, saw our work on the walls when he was in our house, and said, "I'd like to model for you." So we did Rodney on his own.
Well, let's have a look at Rodney on his own.
Yeah.
There he is.
Yeah.
Obviously very fit.
He was. He was tiny. I mean, he really was. He was about 5'6", 5'7", but he was, you know, but he's one of life's really nice people. And it's a great pleasure to work with people who are genuinely nice people.
He looks quite a character, actually.
He was lovely. He was really sweet.
Well, I will soon be opening things up for questions. So if you'd like to ask Trevor something, please click on the chat bubble at the bottom of the screen. No need for comments, actually, just pithy questions. And they'll be open any second now. So Trevor, what is your current project?
We've got one or two on the go just now, Peter.
You were telling me something about Scotland's people, or?
Well, yes, Scotland's
people. About?
Back in 2002, 2003, we did an exhibition in Edinburgh. We used the local newspapers, radio, television. And we were looking for people in Edinburgh to be nominated who did something for the city. You know, they did something. So we ended up doing, I think, 80 portraits in year one. And they went on exhibition in Ocean Terminal. And then they were so successful, they asked us to do another 70, which we did in year two. So we had a big exhibition that lasted 2 years. So what we're doing now is moving on slightly, and I've always loved pen small trades, and this is really an homage to that because I just love the simplicity. So this project is about people in Scotland who do something unusual, different, work-wise, job-wise, all done with the same background, one big softbox, one 30-year-old reflector, and a little Fuji camera.
Okay, let's have a look at the images.
Okay.
What a great project. You must be one of the best known people in Edinburgh, I should think.
Well, we've done about probably 40 or 50 in total so far, Peter, but yeah, it's fun. What is even more interesting is actually meeting such a diverse range of people who do the most wonderful, the gentleman with the hat and the saw and the fiddle, the bow. We had no idea what Edgar did. We knew he played the musical saw. He's actually Portuguese, but he's lived in Edinburgh for many years. And you were talking about spine-tingling moments. And when he came, normally we would say, what do you do? To see how their body moves and what happens. And he pulled out that big saw and his bow, and he sat on the stool in the studio, and I kind of expected some kind of dirgy music. And he played Autumn from Vivaldi's Four Seasons. And it was like, oh my God, this is just amazing. And Holly, who's the doula, who has loved, I was talking to her about how are we going to project what you do? How can we describe what you do? And she said, well, I have an idea, Trevor. And I said, what is it, Holly? She said, well, I have my youngest son's umbilical cord still in my deep freeze. I'll get it out tonight. It's a particularly long umbilical cord, and I'll do something with it. And she brought it in the next day in a cart door ice cream tub lined with kitchen foil. And she'd taken her son's umbilical cord and formed it into the word love. They're just amazing moments that you know, as photographers, we are so privileged to do what we do. I just can't get across that we just have so much privilege that I don't think people sometimes realize.
Yeah, you obviously get to see all sorts and all types of things. So once all the virus restrictions are eliminated, what would you like to do? What's the project further ahead you might like to do?
Well, we want to finish this one. It might take us another year to do that. We're working on another book that's possibly going to come out later on this year into next year, probably next year now with all the aggravation with COVID. So yeah, there's just, today I was out photographing plants. I was photographing the movement of the grasses we've got growing in the garden, just to see what we can do with grasses growing. Faye doesn't even know that I was out there doing that today. I just suddenly thought, so I just shot the 200mm lens on the Fuji and thought, I wonder what we could do with these. Could we do something creative? And so then just try something.
Now, we've had a few questions already on social media, as you know, particularly about this one image, which we've seen before. I think it's called the pipewell tree.
It is.
Questions include, why is the nude female rather than male? And why nude at all? What would you say?
Well, I don't particularly like, no, I don't like, that's the wrong word to use. We tend generally to work with female figures rather than male figures, so that's the answer to that question. Why not clothes? Because that would completely defeat the purpose of showing young skin against texture of the tree. It's about old and young. It's about youth and age. And yeah, I mean, I'll put a picture up of the tree on its own if that would satisfy somebody.
Of course, this sort of controversy, as you know, has been around ever since the female form was first depicted, and not just in photography either. And to give but one example, Aubrey Beardsley died in 1898, but in 1966, can we see the next slide actually, Stuart? There we are, Aubrey Beardsley. The police raided a London shop and confiscated all the books and postcards featuring Beardsley images and charged the shop owner under the Obscene Publications Act. Now, there was outrage because the very same images were simultaneously on display in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And the Director of Public Prosecutions was deeply unimpressed and ordered the police to take the drawings back, and the charges were dropped. Does it depress you when people look at, I suppose you'd say, moral values rather than art for its own sake?
Yes, totally depresses me. I just don't understand the attitude. I really don't, Peter. I find it very sad. I would say it shows a lack of education in photography and what photography is about. I mean, we're not showing pornography here. We're showing what we believe is fine art photography. And you know, if you don't like it, as they say in social media, move on. Don't comment, just move on by. It's not going to affect me. It's not going to change what I do, what we do. That's
fine. Questions coming in now, Trevor. Here's an interesting one. What is the future for nude portraiture? The question continues. We have the raw confrontational approach to nude photography of people like Annika von Hausloff and Francesca Woodman. Then there's your approach, tasteful nude art. Where next for the depiction of the nude body?
I really don't know. I mean, there's obviously many ways of doing it. I mean, you look at Ruth Bernhardt's work back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, you know, nudes in boxes. You can look at Anne Brigman's work. You can look at Mapplethorpe's work, all trying to push the boundaries. We don't push the boundaries. Remember, probably unlike a lot of people who are listening in or watching, we do this. This is our profession. This is our job. And we sell these images through galleries, through websites, through collectors who buy our work all over the world. So we have that's how we put food on the table. And we never stretch beyond what we deem as acceptable imagery. So we would never show anything that was anything close to being tasteless.
Well, you have a formula, don't you? It's not formulaic, but you have your own formula, and it seems to work.
We have a formula that works for us, which is why we went down the route 2 or 3 years ago to build our own darkroom, to do our own platinum palladium printing, because that's what collectors want. And we've always believed in producing work that is tasteful and non-confrontational. And if people find it objectionable and they find the naked body somehow scary, whatever, then just, you know, take up knitting.
Now, we've had a few questions actually about light, including what lights do you use on location, or is it natural light? And in particular, how did you light the image of the woman with the bow and arrow?
Nothing is lit, Peter.
I'm sorry?
Nothing is lit. Nothing is ever lit. We don't take anything with us on location. When we go to do a shoot, we take a camera each, we take our old reflector, that's it. And people keep thinking, how did you light something? Well, we did. It's God's own light. It's natural daylight. It's just we go there at the right time of day, when we know the weather's right, and we know the light's going to be good, and we will wait for it to be right. If it's not right on that day, we'll come back another day.
Next question. You mentioned you were sometimes inspired by the location. What other things inspire you?
Life inspires me. The thought that tomorrow, you know, we could create an image that will be the finest image we've ever created. There's always something ahead to look forward to. There's always something to stimulate your little grey cells. Visually, we need to be aware at all times.
Next question. Do you direct the models, or do you let them choose their own poses?
As I said earlier on, Peter, we are anal about directing. We will show the model exactly the pose we want them to do. We will show them, we will demonstrate it. Either Faye or I will demonstrate the pose. My hip movement is remarkably good. If after we've done that, the model can then add something to the image by saying, well, what if I put my hand here? Or what if I did this? It may work, it may not work, but no, we direct them totally.
So as you said, it is a collaborative exercise.
Yes, it's between the three of us, yeah.
Next one. What would you say makes a classic or iconic image as opposed to just being beautiful?
Well, how would you define classic or iconic? I mean, it's all down to the viewer, isn't it? I mean, you know, what to you is classic might, to me, be, you know, just another image. I don't know. There's no answer to that. I mean, we have images that reflect us, and people will remember us by the images that we've created, or a particular image, but whether they are iconic, that's up to the viewer, not up to us. Now,
you might be interested in this next question, if I can find it. Where is it? Yes, we ought to say that you chair the RPS Distinctions Applied panel,
yes.
Which is work of professional photographers and anyone who does photography for a purpose, like a book and so on.
Yeah.
So you know all about distinctions. And this question says, I have the impression that nudes do not go down well for a fellowship application. So maybe you'd like to refute that.
Oh, I would disagree with that totally. I mean, I've seen a few panels going through that are well deserving and are nudes. No, I would disagree with that totally. I think that all panel members are open-minded and are liberal enough to appreciate all aspects of photography, and they would not have any reason to downgrade it because they were showing nudes. Absolutely not. No, that's no.
And of course, the RPS policy is anything that is within the law is absolutely acceptable as a photographic image.
Absolutely.
Right, next question is, if you're a current photographer who would like to get into this style of photography, how would you go about it?
Well, I've been doing this for 50 plus years, Peter. It's not an overnight success, I can assure you. I think basically it's finding an area of photography that you love doing, that you wake up every morning thinking, yeah, this is what I want to do. Not, oh God, I've got to go and photograph a wedding, or, you know, I'm a baby photographer or whatever. You know, there are those who love doing that. I couldn't do it, but I think you have to be in love with what you're doing before anything else.
Next one is, do you ever shoot in color?
No. That's the short answer. No, never. Everything is always black and white. Even the screens on the Fujis are turned to black and white. And people ask us, why do you have your screen in black and white? And it's only when you see the screen in black and white, can you see the tonal range, you can see the greys and the blacks, and you know what you're getting. In color, you just see this horrible mishmash of color.
Okay, here's an interesting one. If you have to construct a photograph, then I think you've moved away from photography to drama, fantasy, and scene setting. Some of your photographs, this person says, would never occur naturally. So for me, they make no sense.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I mean, you had Ria on last week, didn't you?
We did.
It was, I remember her panel, and I saw the images because I was there, and I thought they were absolutely amazing. They're
Total construction, of course.
totally not real. If you take a plant or a flower, cut it out of your garden and take it into your studio or your living room and put it up against a black background, that's constructed. So the only thing that's not really constructed is street photography. Any portrait is constructed because you're telling somebody what you want them to do. So that's just a bizarre question.
Here's an interesting one. How would you like to be remembered as a photographer?
How would I like to be remembered? As somebody who was totally in love with photography and just wanted to leave imagery that may well last time, it may well not last time, but just somebody who tried very hard to encourage young and old to become involved in photography and to appreciate the broad aspect of photography, to look at all the different genres, be it, you know, Martin Parr or Eggleston or Michael Kenna or Jean Lucy, and all the others, Deborah Turbeville, Sarah Moon. All of these are fab, but you know, you mention these names to some photographers and they have no idea who you're talking about. So there's so much out there to learn, and we never stop learning, we never stop reading, we never stop buying books in photography. We just love all aspects.
The passion certainly shone through tonight. So let's have our last question, which is an interesting one, or more a statement really. For me, it says, it's not so much the nakedness. We're talking about the tree image again.
Yeah.
So much the nakedness, but the use, yet again, of a young, skinny female with flawless skin, deliberately posed in a position of submission below a powerful subject. Probably exactly what the photographer wanted, but it's a cliche nonetheless, and it perpetuates historical attitudes towards women. However, the fact that we are talking about this image means it challenges, it has impact, and surely that is what art is supposed to do.
Absolutely, I would agree. And there was never any intention to have the female figure subjugated beneath this masculine tree. I mean, most trees, most you look at nature, term nature as Mother Earth, female nature. So it was only intended to be a contrast between the age of the tree and the youth of, and she's not a young model, she's late 20s, so she's certainly not young. And yes, well, maybe she did have flawless skin, I don't know, but you know, yeah, anything that challenges and causes discussion and allows people to be educated, both for and against a subject, I think that's important, Peter.
Well, I think all that has happened as a result of this talk, because we've had weeks of discussion on social media. And thank you for that. And sadly, that's all we have time for, Trevor. So I'm extremely grateful to you for explaining all about your work, which is, I know, in great demand. And it's been, you know, fascinating to hear how you and Faye go about things. And I mentioned the applied panel, distinction panel, which you chair. And you, of course, have an assessment next week, don't you?
We do, next Thursday. I'm looking forward to it greatly. Great panel members again, so I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, thank you very, very much for tonight, Trevor.
My pleasure.
It's been an absolute joy. And I'd also like to thank the production team of Stuart Wall and Andy Moore and everyone who's joined us for this event. And next week, we have Paul Colley, FRPS, and he'll be discussing his research fellowship that looked at new ways of photographing bats. And that interview will be with Stuart Wall, and that should be very interesting. And we are back with our digital roadshows in September. So everything you need to know about licentiate and then associate the following week, and then fellowship the week after that. We can't take our prints around the country because of these virus restrictions. So we'll be concentrating on one level of distinction each week with successful applicants, panel chairs, and so on, everything you need to know. And finally, we have a very good offer for you. If you're a non-member, you can join for 20% off the membership fee if you've attended an online event before the end of this month. But if you're already a member, but you refer someone else to be a member, you'll receive 3 months free membership. So it's well worth it. So I hope you've enjoyed tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing Trevor Yerbury talking about his work, and good night from everyone at the Royal Photographic Society.